Sometimes the adults you trust to teach you can mess you up the most. This was the moment I realized that height isn't just a physical trait. It's a status symbol, a silent caste system. And one sentence from a teacher I trusted shattered whatever confidence I had left, and all but confirmed all my deepest insecurities. It all happened in AP Biology. I was 16, and on the second day of class, he lined us up against the wall by height. I loved this teacher, and I trusted him, but he said something I will never forget. When I was in my early teens, science was my passion, specifically biology. I just had this huge fascination with evolution. I started out in 10th grade biology in 9th grade, and the teacher was awesome. I loved him. We'll call him Mr. So-and-so. I don't remember his name anyway. And by the time that year ended, I was even more enthusiastic. The next year, during 10th grade, I took honors chemistry, which was cool, but it was extremely difficult. But I was looking forward to doing AP biology in 11th grade when I was 16. Lo and behold, my favorite teacher would be teaching AP biology. But he had announced to everybody that,
"Hey, I'm retiring. I'm not going to do this anymore."
And I was so bummed out. So I met him in person to try and convince him to stay for one more year. I basically told him that I felt that there was a higher purpose and that he was meant to stay one more year. And that convinced him to put off his retirement for one more year. Just for me. Not only would I be taking his AP biology class, but I would also be taking another advanced biology class that's focused more on anatomy, along with a bunch of other difficult classes. But leading up to that point, when I was 16, the insecurity I had over my height had ballooned into something more than it had ever been before. So the summer before 10th grade started, I attended the same summer camp that I had gone to ever since I was 10 years old. But this time was different, and I started to notice patterns. I have an uncanny ability to spot and identify patterns in society very quickly. And all of these patterns I was spotting about what girls liked and didn't like led to me feeling extremely bad about myself and focusing in on my height. So at some point during the first semester of sophomore year, I had gone to the doctor, and she had mentioned that my growth had plateaued. We tested my growth plates, and it came back that they were all sealed. And I just had a mental breakdown. And from that day forward, basically every day I would come home from school and do searches and research to try and figure out what could cause someone to stop growing at the age of 12 and have their growth plates sealed unnaturally early. And that's when I started discovering all the chemicals that we have in our products and in our food, and the effects of the chemicals lined up with the symptoms that I had. I started connecting the dots, and I started comparing myself to my peers, and I started seeing myself as lesser than. I started noticing how my peers that had higher class families grew their own food, had their own cows or chickens or vegetables. And it really was a recipe for me putting a magnifying glass on the hierarchy of evolution and the scale of supremacy of different human body types. And from that point forward, the stakes were raised. Everything that I learned in science and biology class felt a lot more personal and a lot more sexual and carnal and dark and demonic even. And so that brings us to the fateful day, the day that my obsession with science and biology went from being something that brought me some degree of anxiety, but with interest and wonder along with it, to literally being a brutal source of fuel for self-hatred and body shaming. It was the second day of AP biology class. The first day he had dedicated to the syllabus. Now, this teacher, he was always a tall guy, and it was never something I really thought of. I was just like, oh, he's just a tall guy, whatever. But all of a sudden, it became something relevant that he decided to make a big topic of discussion. So what he did was he asked everybody to tell the class their height, and then he divided us each into categories of groups of people that are of different heights. He had us all get into our assigned height groups and then stand and line up against the wall from shortest to tallest. And the whole time, my heart was racing I had butterflies in my stomach. It was basically like the worst case scenario for my insecurity at that time. The whole time I was wondering, what's coming next? What is this? Some kind of weird experiment? So then he gets up in front of the class. He waltzes on up in front of his desk, stands up real straight with a smug grin on his face, and he starts talking about how he used to play basketball in college and how tall he is and how many benefits it brought him in life. And you won't believe what he says next. He basically said, those of you in the taller group, you are evolutionarily superior. You'll be the winners, and you're built for success. He starts to talk about basketball and sports and how tall people are better, and basically insinuating that not only are they the top of the human hierarchy evolutionarily, but also they're at the top of the human hierarchy in society as well. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I just remember standing there, silent, slightly shaking because I was so nervous, and just wondering when it was going to be over. And then when it was finally over, I just rushed out of the class because I was practically in tears. After going through an entire year realizing that I stopped growing when I was 12, that I'm smaller than all the other kids, that I'm bullied all the time, all the girls that I like don't like me back, and it's all because I'm short. And now on top of it, I've got my respected, loved science teacher hammering it in, telling me that I'm basically genetically inferior. Now, this brutal truth that he shared with the class was absolutely real, but it really was unnecessary to say, especially just straight up on the second day of class. And the way he said it, with such smugness, I never saw him the same way again. Now, when you combine the words of my trusted teacher and all the findings and research and observations that I had made myself over the previous year, this was something that I could not shake. Every single day, it dominated my mind. Everywhere I went, everywhere I looked, I was just seeing more and more evidence of human social hierarchies. And then I go to my other science class, my advanced biology class, and he reinforces it even more by teaching us all the different human bodily processes, sexual development, and the reasons why females have preferences for certain male characteristics and vice versa. And then I go back to the AP biology class again with Mr. So-and-so, and he continues to reference his height throughout the year because it's constantly a relevant topic when we're talking about evolution, and height and size being a literal result and symbol of evolutionary success. It became increasingly obvious that when you're small, you are lesser than, and you come from a place of scarcity rather than abundance. And the worst part was, it wasn't just him. Around that same time, I heard a radio show host I used to listen to, someone I actually liked, go on this 2-hour rant about how short men are biologically inferior. I'll save that story for another day, but it hit me hard. It felt like the whole world was saying the same thing. I wasn't built to win. So as a result of all this reinforced insecurity and body shaming being confirmed by science, it basically led to the breakdown of my functionality in school. I could no longer focus. I was smoking weed constantly, and all it was doing was making me even more insecure. Because as you know, cannabis really enhances the imagination, and it really helped me learn science and biology by thinking outside of the box. But at the same time, my mind would just go on these long, drawn-out, tangential thoughts focused on sexuality and evolution that all reinforced the idea that I was inferior and that the most fertile, feminine, abundant woman, of course, wouldn't want a little runt like me. They want a big, tall, strong man to provide for them and protect them. I was crying every day in school. I wasn't talking to people anymore. By that time, all my closest friends had left the school. I was there all alone, studying in advanced classes with kids older than me. The nerdy kids I hung out with didn't understand, they didn't really care, and they thought I was weird for being all depressed all the time. I started missing assignments. I started failing. And to top it all off, these tall kids I was jealous of started bullying me because of my small size. And they did it more and more, and they made my life a living hell. And at the same time, I couldn't fight back because they were so superior to me. So before the end of that fall semester, I ended up dropping both the advanced bio and the AP biology class. And I actually ended up leaving the school not long after. It's a long story. I had to go through hell to make it happen because they weren't going to let me do it because I was failing classes. I had to beg on my knees. I had to cry to teachers, beg for extra credit so I could please get my grade up to a C so that I could get the hell out of here. And I thank God that they gave me an opportunity to do just that because I had to get out of there. And when it comes to school, I could not focus because all I could think about all day was how humiliating it was to live life in my body. The shame that I felt every time he said something about height or supremacy or one of the tall kids bullied me, the complete and utter humiliation of knowing that I'm inferior and that this is going to be my life made me want to die. And this series of events led to me making the ultimate change in the trajectory of my life. I just became completely disillusioned with science, biology, and school in general, because all it did was constantly remind me of how worthless and inferior I was. Having spent all of sophomore year learning about all the chemicals that were put in products to literally warp and stunt the bodies of the lower classes. Meanwhile, I'm sitting here studying to be a scientist when scientists are the ones that created these chemicals. And I mean, some scientists do good, like marine biologists and environmental scientists, but I wasn't really interested in doing something like that. And I had come to the conclusion that the most of what a scientist does is they act as a pawn for the government or corporations to either do something that actually ends up hurting the environment or ends up harming other human beings and our health. And the last thing I wanted to do with my life was be a pawn for the government and corporations that created the system that led to me being put at a permanent disadvantage because of things that I had absolutely no control over. And that's when I turned to business. I wanted to have a greater impact on the future of humanity. And from what I saw, it was businesses and multinational corporations that really held the reins of power in our world. Not governments. It's the king behind the crown. The multinational corporations that have held power in the background for the last 150 years. I'm going to play their game and play it differently. I'm here to win on my own terms. So yeah, Mr. So-and-so, you didn't just make me feel small. He reinforced and cemented the brutal, ugly truth in my mind of how brutally unfair and unequal the system is, and the Christian values I had been taught my whole life of every human being having equal value just went up in smoke and never came back. And he made me realize that even if I was born in prehistoric times, even if I was an animal, I would still have to live with the constant presence of a dominance hierarchy, with the biggest guy at the top and the smallest one at the bottom. When someone you respect tells you you're not built to win, it sticks. So what's something that a teacher or adult said to you that stuck in your head for years? I'd like to hear about it in the comments. And if you like the story in this video, you'll probably like my last video where I tell the story of how a decade of hard work, misfortune, and bad luck broke me down into a burned out husk of a man. Thanks for watching.